The massive crystal dome of Nexus Prime stretched high above the council chamber. Inside, representatives from 847 different species sat in their designated spots. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, turning thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Kang Dae-ho adjusted his dark blue uniform and looked around the chamber. As Earth's main ambassador, he had seen this place many times before. But today felt different. Today felt dangerous. Next to him sat his team. Lee Soo-jin, their military advisor, kept her face calm, but her hand stayed close to her datapad. Park. Min-ho, who handled trade deals, looked worried as he read through his notes again. Yoon Ha-na, their expert on alien biology, watched the other species with curious eyes. At the center of the great chamber stood Chancellor Thexvar. The Valthari leader was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow under the lights. His forearms moved gracefully as he spoke, but his voice carried a cold edge that made everyone listen. The Galactic Council has reached a decision, Thexvar announced. His words echoed through the chamber and all conversations stopped. The human species has proven itself to be too dangerous for unrestricted membership. Kang Dae-ho felt his heart skip a beat. Around the chamber, he could see some species nodding in agreement while others looked uncomfortable. The peaceful Etherian representative Zelani Vosk seemed particularly troubled by what was happening. In the past 5 years, Thexvar continued, humans have engaged in violent conflicts with the hegemony raiders. While they claim these actions were defensive, the Council believes human aggression poses a threat to galactic peace. Lee Soo-jin leaned forward slightly. Her jaw was tight with anger, but she stayed quiet. They all knew that speaking out of turn in the council chamber was a serious offense. Therefore, the Chancellor said, raising his voice, the Council demands the following from the human species. First, you must surrender 80% of your military fleet to Council control. Second, you must accept cultural rehabilitation programs to reduce your aggressive tendencies. Third, you must accept permanent junior status in this council, with no voting rights on major decisions. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered while others argued among themselves. Kang Dae-ho sat perfectly still, trying to process what he had just heard. They wanted humanity to become slaves in all but name. Park Min-ho whispered urgently. They want to take our ships, change our culture, and make us powerless. This isn't membership, it's surrender. Yoon Ha-na added quietly. The biological data suggests this isn't really about aggression. Look at the voting patterns. The species supporting this are all competitors of ours in trade and technology. Thexvar raised one of his 4 hands, and the chamber slowly grew quiet again. Ambassador, Kang Dae-ho, he said, his voice carrying false politeness. What is humanity's response to these reasonable demands? Kang Dae-ho stood up slowly. He could feel the eyes of nearly 1,000 beings watching him. Chancellor Thexvar, honored council members, this decision requires consultation with my government. I request 72 hours to discuss these terms with Earth. Several species made sounds of annoyance. A representative from the warrior-like Korthak Empire shouted, 72 hours to accept the obvious? Your species should be grateful we're offering anything at all. But Thexvar seemed pleased by the request. Very well. The Council grants this time. But understand, Ambassador, these terms are not negotiable. Accept them or face the consequences of defying this body. As the session ended, beings began filing out of the chamber. Kang Dae-ho and his team gathered their materials quietly. They were almost at the exit when someone called his name softly. Ambassador Kang, came a gentle voice. They turned to see Zelani Vosk approaching. The Etherian was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shift between blue and green depending on the light. Her people were known for their wisdom and peaceful nature. Representative Vosk, Kang Dae-ho replied with a respectful bow. May I speak with you privately? She asked, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. They found a quiet alcove away from the main corridors. Zelani Vosk's usual calm seemed shaken. Ambassador, I must warn you. If humanity refuses these demands, the consequences will be severe. Complete economic embargo, Military action, isolation from all galactic civilization. Why are you telling me this? Kang Dae-ho asked. Because some of us remember the truth, she said sadly. Your species didn't start those conflicts with the hegemony. You were protecting smaller worlds that couldn't defend themselves. The Kashara colonies, the mining stations in the Outer Rim, they would have been destroyed without human intervention. Lee, Su-jin stepped forward. Then why didn't you speak up in the chamber? Zelani Vosk's skin shifted to a darker blue. Because I am one voice against hundreds. The larger species see humans as a threat to their dominance. The smaller ones are too, afraid to speak, and the Chancellor, he has been planning this for months. Planning what exactly? Park Min-ho asked. To remove humanity from the galactic stage, she replied. Your people are too innovative, too independent. You don't follow the established order. You ask questions that make others uncomfortable. You help species that others would rather ignore. Yoon Hana frowned. So this was never really about aggression? No, Zelani Vosk confirmed. This is about control, about maintaining the status quo. Your species represents change, and change terrifies those in power. They talked for a few more minutes before Zelani Vosk had to leave. As she walked away, she turned back one last time. Whatever Earth decides, know that some of us will remember this day with shame. The human delegation returned to their ship in silence. The journey back to Earth would take 3 days, but Kang Dae-ho sent an encrypted message ahead explaining the situation. As their ship left Nexus Prime's orbit, Park Min-ho stared out at the stars. Do you think they really expect us to accept those terms? Yes, Lee Su-jin replied firmly. They think we have no choice. They think we need them more than they need us. Kang Dae-ho considered this as he watched the Council's massive space station shrink behind them. Perhaps it's time they learned otherwise. None of them knew that back on Earth, President Kim Tae-young was already meeting with Admiral Choi Won-sik and other leaders. None of them knew that secret plans prepared for exactly this possibility were already being put into motion. The Council had offered humanity a choice between submission and isolation. They assumed, like so many before them, that those were the only 2 options available. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. 3 days later, Kang Dae-ho stood once again before the Galactic Council. The chamber was packed even fuller than before. Word had spread that humanity would give their answer today, and everyone wanted to witness what they expected to be a complete surrender. Chancellor Thexvar looked pleased as he called the session to order. Ambassador Kang Dae-ho, has your species reached a decision regarding the Council's generous terms? Kang Dae-ho took a deep breath. Behind him, his team sat perfectly still. They all knew what was coming. Honored Chancellor, after careful consideration with our government, humanity must respectfully decline your offer. The chamber exploded into chaos. Some species roared with anger, while others seemed shocked that humans would dare refuse. Thexvar's silver skin turned a darker shade and his forearms gestured wildly for order. Decline? He shouted over the noise. You decline the mercy of this council? You choose to defy 847 civilized species? We choose freedom, Kang Dae-ho replied simply. Within minutes, the council voted. The result was overwhelming, complete embargo of all human space. No trade, no communication, no diplomatic contact. As far as the galactic community was concerned, humanity no longer existed. As the human delegation prepared to leave Nexus Prime for the last time, many species watched with satisfaction. They had rid themselves of the troublesome humans. Now, things could return to the proper order. What none of them knew was that Admiral Choi Won-sik had been expecting this exact outcome for months. Back on Earth, the Admiral stood in the command center deep beneath Seoul. Around him, screens showed every human colony, every space station, every ship in their territory. Director Seo Yoon-ji and Intelligence Chief Lim Seong-min watched as he gave the order. They had all been dreading. Activate Operation Silent Step, he said quietly. Across 200 human worlds, the message arrived simultaneously. Colony administrators, station commanders, ship captains. They all received the same simple code. After years of preparation, it was time to leave. On New Busan, Colony Director Han Ju-won had been ready for this day. The industrial world had been humanity's pride, with massive factories and research centers. Now, specialized teams began the careful work of dismantling everything. Pack it all, Han Ju-won told his assistants. Every machine, every computer, every piece of equipment. Leave nothing behind that they can use. It wasn't just about taking their belongings. The humans had spent years developing technology that could erase their presence completely. Quantum scrubbers removed all traces of human DNA from the soil. Digital erasers wiped every computer system so thoroughly that not even fragments of data remained. At the Kepler research station, scientist Nam Gi-tak supervised the removal of decades of research. His team had been working on advanced physics problems that could revolutionize space travel. That knowledge would not be left for the Council to steal. "Are you sure about the quantum drives?" his assistant asked nervously. "Completely sure," Nam Gi-tak replied as he watched the massive equipment being loaded onto transport ships. "If they want to progress without us, let them figure it out themselves." Captain Oh Young-e commanded one of the hundreds of cargo ships moving through human space. Her vessel, the Sunrise, was packed with civilians from the farming world of New Jeju. Like every other transport captain, she followed strict routes that avoided all contact with alien ships. "How long until we reach the rendezvous point?" asked her navigator. 6 hours, she replied, watching the scanner carefully. "And remember, if any alien ships approach, we follow Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was simple but effective. If detected by non-human vessels, human ships would immediately jump to hyperspace using random coordinates. No human would be captured, interrogated, or forced to reveal their destination. The evacuation took 6 months. The Council, confident in their victory, didn't even bother to monitor human space closely. They assumed humans would need years to pack up their civilization, and by then it would be too late to hide from Council oversight. They were wrong. The first Council expedition arrived at the Sol system expecting to find a weakened Earth begging for forgiveness. Instead, they found empty space. Earth was still there, but it was dark. No lights, no communications, no signs of life. The massive orbital stations that had ringed the planet were simply gone. Not destroyed, gone. There wasn't even debris. Commander Velteran of the Council survey ship Discovery couldn't believe his sensors. "Scan again," he ordered his crew. "Sir, I've scanned 5 times. There's nothing there. No energy signatures, no artificial structures, no electromagnetic emissions. It's like they just vanished." The same scene repeated across human space. On New Busan, the massive city stood empty but intact. Every building was there, but stripped completely clean. Not a single piece of technology remained. Even the power generators had been removed so carefully that the buildings looked like they had never been occupied. Most disturbing were the devices humans had left behind. On every world, in every system, small crystalline structures broadcast the same message in perfect galactic standard. "You chose isolation. We grant it to you." When Council teams tried to examine these devices, they found them impossible to understand. The technology was clearly human in origin, but far more advanced than anything humans had shown before. Worse, the devices seemed to actively prevent detailed scanning. Dr. Kethmaran, the Council's leading physicist, spent weeks studying one of the crystals. "It's like they developed new science during their evacuation," he reported to Chancellor Thexvar. "These devices operate on principles we don't understand." "Impossible," the Chancellor replied. "Humans are barely capable of interstellar travel. They can't have advanced this far in 6 months." But the evidence was undeniable. As weeks turned to months, it became clear that humanity had completely disappeared. No human ships were detected anywhere in known space. No signals came from their former territory. They had achieved perfect silence. Some Council members began to suggest that perhaps they had made a mistake, but Chancellor Thexvar dismissed these concerns. "Good riddance," he declared. "The galaxy is better without their disruptive influence." Admiral Kethriel, commander of the Council's military forces, was less certain. "Sir, our strategic analysis shows that humans were involved in preventing more conflicts than we realized. Without their patrol routes, without their interference," HFY interrupted, "the galaxy can finally achieve true peace." But deep in space, automated monitoring stations began detecting strange energy signatures from the direction of former human territory. Every attempt to investigate these signals failed. Ships would approach the boundary of human space and simply stop. Their engines would shut down, their communications would cut out, and they would drift helplessly until rescue arrived. The humans had not just left. They had sealed their borders with technology the Council could not understand or penetrate. Intelligence Chief Lim Seong-min, now working from a location the Council could never find, smiled as he read the reports. Operation Silent Step had worked perfectly. Not only had humanity escaped intact, but they had gained something even more valuable than freedom. They had gained time to grow, to develop, to become something the Council had never imagined possible. The aliens thought they had expelled a problem. Instead, they had created their own eventual reckoning. In the darkness between stars, humanity was no longer bound by the Council's limited vision of what was possible. They were free to become whatever they chose to be. The Council would regret their decision soon enough. 2 years had passed since the humans disappeared, and Trade Minister Kelteran was looking at numbers that made no sense. He stared at his datapad in his office high above the crystal spires of Nexus Prime, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. "These shipping reports can't be correct," he muttered to his assistant, a young Valthari named Kesselin. "I've checked them 3 times, Minister," Kesselin replied nervously. "Cargo delivery times are up 34% across all major trade routes. Fleet efficiency has dropped to levels not seen in 50 years. Kelteran rubbed his temples. The massive holographic display in his office showed trade routes across the galaxy, with red marks indicating delays and problems. There were far too many red marks. "What changed?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Well, sir," Kesselin said carefully, "most of our navigation algorithms were developed in partnership with human mathematicians. The shipping computers still work, but they're not as efficient without the human updates. The trade minister had tried not to think about this problem for months. When the humans left, they had taken more than just their ships and people. They had taken their knowledge, their innovations, their improvements to systems that the Council had come to depend on. Across the galaxy, similar problems were appearing everywhere. On the industrial world of Vector, Hive Queen Zeska was dealing with her own crisis. Her people had been miners for thousands of years, but their best equipment had been human-designed. Now critical systems were failing with no one to repair them. "Show me the failure reports again," she commanded her worker drones. The data was depressing. Mining efficiency was down 40%. Equipment breakdowns had increased 5 times. Over. Worst of all, the new mining sites they had planned to open were impossible to develop without human geological surveys. "The deep core extractors are shutting down one by one," reported her chief technician. "We don't understand how the human modifications worked. Without their maintenance protocols, the machines are breaking faster than we can fix them." Zeska had never liked humans much. They were too individual, too unpredictable for her hive mind sensibilities. But she was beginning to realize that their unpredictability had been useful. Human engineers saw problems differently than other species. They found solutions that others missed. Now those solutions were gone, and the Vectorian mining empire was slowly grinding to a halt. But economic problems were only the beginning. The real crisis was happening in the Outer Rim territories, where hegemony raiders were growing bolder with each passing month. Representative Velandra of the peaceful Kishara world stood before an emergency council session, her usually calm demeanor cracked with desperation. Her people were tall and thin, with skin that changed color based on their emotions. Right now she was a deep purple, the color of fear. "Honored Chancellor," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "This is the 7th raid on our colonies in 2 months. My people are dying." Chancellor Thexvar looked uncomfortable. The hegemony had always been a problem. But their attacks had been manageable when human patrol fleets helped maintain order. Now, with humans gone, the raiders seemed to think the entire outer rim was undefended. The Council's security forces are doing everything possible, Thexvar replied, but his words sounded empty even to him. Everything possible? Valandra's skin shifted to an angry red. Your forces arrived 6 hours after the attack on New Kashara. 6 hours. The humans used to respond to distress calls in 30 minutes. Admiral Kethriel, the Council's military commander, stood up reluctantly. Representative Valandra, our ships are not positioned for rapid response like the human patrols. We're working to adjust our deployment, but it takes time. Time my people don't have, she shot back. The raiders took 3,000 civilians from New Kashara. 3,000. Where was the Council's protection then? The chamber fell, silent. Everyone knew the truth. Human military doctrine had been designed for exactly this kind of rapid response. Their patrol patterns, their ship positioning, their communication networks had all been optimized to stop raiders before they could cause serious damage. Without humans, the Council's military was like a giant, slow machine trying to swat fast-moving insects. Dr. Morgan of the Etheric Research Institute was discovering his own problems. The brilliant scientist had spent decades working on medical research, often collaborating with human doctors and biologists. Now he faced a puzzle that was literally killing people. The quantum resonance patterns don't match, he explained to his research team. Dr. Jang Hyun-soo's notes mention a specific frequency adjustment, but the exact calculations are missing. His team of researchers from various species looked confused. They were working on a cure for Thessian wasting disease, a condition that had been almost solved before the humans left. Dr. Jang had been the leading expert on cross-species immunity, and his work was crucial for the final breakthrough. Can't we just recreate his research? Asked Dr. Felthas, a young Etherian scientist. We've been trying for 8 months, Dr. Morgan replied sadly. Human biology is different from ours. They understand genetic patterns in ways we never learned. Without their perspective, we're missing crucial pieces of the puzzle. In the 6 months since they had started this project, 40,000 beings across multiple worlds had died from the disease. Before the humans left, the death rate had been dropping rapidly thanks to joint research efforts. Back on Nexus Prime, Sub-Chancellor Creven was putting together a report that made him sick to his stomach. As Chancellor Thexvar's aide, he had access to all the data about the post-human galaxy. What he found was terrifying: economic efficiency down across all sectors. Military response times increased by an average of 400%. Scientific progress slowed to a crawl in dozens of fields. Piracy and raiding up everywhere. Several minor conflicts that would have been prevented by human diplomacy had escalated into actual wars. The humans hadn't just been members of the Council. They had been the oil that kept the galactic machine running smoothly. Sir, Creven said carefully as he entered Thexvar's office, I have the quarterly report on post-Exodus conditions. Thexvar looked up from his own work. Good news, I hope? Surely the galaxy is more peaceful without human interference. Creven hesitated. Sir, the data suggests that human interference was preventing more problems than it caused. Nonsense. Thexvar waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Those numbers are just temporary adjustments. The galaxy will find its natural balance. But even as he said it, Thexvar felt a growing unease. Deep space monitoring stations had been reporting strange energy signatures from the direction of former human space, signals that seemed to be scanning the galaxy, watching and recording everything that happened. When Council ships tried to investigate these signals, they encountered barriers that made no sense. Ships would lose power, communications would fail, and crews would find themselves drifting helplessly until rescue arrived. It was as if human space had become surrounded by some kind of advanced defensive system. Most disturbing of all were the automated probes, small, clearly human-designed craft that appeared at the edges of various systems, scanned everything in sight, and vanished before anyone could intercept them. They ignored all attempts at communication and seemed to be cataloging the changes. in the galaxy since the Exodus. Sir, Creven said quietly, what if we made a mistake? Chancellor Thexvar's skin turned a darker shade of silver. We followed proper procedure. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable. The galaxy is better without them. But as he said the words, an alarm began sounding throughout the building. Another hegemony raid, another desperate call for help that would arrive too late. In the growing chaos of the post-human galaxy, some beings were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Questions about what they had really lost when they drove humanity away. The answers to those questions would prove more disturbing than anyone could imagine. 5 years had passed since the humans disappeared, and the galaxy was dying. Captain Drevkin stood on the bridge of his cargo ship, the Fortune's Dream, watching his crew work frantically at their stations. The ship was loaded with medical supplies, desperately needed on the outer rim worlds, but getting there alive was becoming harder every day. Sir, we're picking up 3 ships on our scanner, reported his navigator, a nervous Thessian named Kextal. They're moving to intercept. Drevkan cursed under his breath. Pirates again. The great trade routes that had once been the safest paths through the galaxy were now hunting grounds for raiders and criminals. Without human patrol fleets, cargo ships like his were easy targets. How far to the next council checkpoint? He asked. 14 hours at current speed, Kextal replied. And how long before those ships reach us? 20 minutes. Drevkin had been a cargo captain for 30 years. Before the human exodus, he had never worried about pirates on the main trade routes. Human patrol ships had been everywhere, responding to distress calls in minutes. Captain Song Jae-hyuk, one of the human explorers who had first mapped these routes, had designed them with safety in mind. Now those routes were death traps. Prepare for emergency jump, Drevkan ordered. We'll have to try the Kethmore passage. His crew looked terrified. The Kethmore passage was dangerous even under the best conditions, but it was better than facing pirates with no hope of rescue. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out every day. Piracy had increased by 400% since the humans left. The Council's security forces were too slow, too spread out, and too tied up in bureaucracy to respond effectively. On Nexus Prime, the situation was even worse. Chancellor Yel Aris, who had replaced the disgraced Thexvar 6 months earlier, stared at reports that painted a picture of complete galactic breakdown. Tell me about the hegemony offensive, she said to Admiral Kethriel. The military commander looked exhausted. They've taken 7 more systems in the past month. Their new strategy is working perfectly against our defenses. What strategy? Yelaris asked, though she dreaded the answer. They're using human tactical doctrines, Kethriel admitted. Somehow they got hold of Admiral Choi Won-sik's strategic manuals. The irony is that humans developed those tactics to fight the hegemony, but now the hegemony is using them against us. Yelaris felt sick. How is that possible? We think they found some human military databases in the ruins of an abandoned station. The worst part is that our own forces never learned these tactics. We always relied on humans to handle the complex, strategic thinking. The hegemony's new offensive was devastating. In 5 years, they had conquered more territory than in the previous 50. Without human military innovation and their unpredictable tactics, Council forces were consistently outmaneuvered. But military defeat was only one of the galaxy's problems. The real disaster was happening on Kethmore. Dr. Yestera stood in her environmental suit on what had once been a beautiful world. Kethmore had been home to billions of beings across dozens of species. Now it was a dead rock, its atmosphere poisoned and its surface scarred by industrial disasters. The atmospheric processors are failing faster than we can repair them, she reported to the Council Emergency Committee through her communicator. We need the human terraforming technology to save what's left. What human technology? Asked Sub-Chancellor Creven from his position at Nexus Prime. The atmospheric scrubbers Dr. Park Sun-woo designed. His team created machines that could clean poisoned air in months instead of decades. We have the basic designs, but we don't understand the quantum filtering systems. Dr. Yestara looked around at the dying world. The industrial accident that had started this disaster could have been contained easily with human technology. Instead, it had spread across continents, killing everything in its path. How many casualties? Creven asked quietly. Current estimates suggest 12 billion dead. The number rises every day. The silence on the communication channel lasted for several minutes. 12 billion beings had died because the Council lacked technology they had once taken for granted. Even worse was the situation in the medical research centers. Dr. Morgan had been working for years to recreate human medical advances, but progress was painfully slow. The Thessian wasting disease has reached crisis levels, he reported to the Emergency Medical Council. Without Dr. Bei Sun Young's immunity research, we're losing the fight. Dr. Felthas, his main assistant, looked up from her datapad. The death toll reached 2 million last week. The disease is spreading to species that were previously immune. How is that possible? Asked Dr. Kexmarin, representing the Council's health department. Dr. Bei was working on hybrid immunity. How? Diseases jumped between species, Dr. Morgan explained. Her research showed that certain conditions could cause rapid mutation. We think that's happening now, but without her notes, we can't predict or prevent it. The plague was spreading across 12 systems, jumping from species to species in ways that defied all previous medical understanding. Before the humans left, Dr. Bei had been close to creating universal immunity protocols. Now, without her expertise, entire populations were dying. On Nexus Prime, Zelani Vosk of the Etherian Collective finally spoke the truth that everyone was afraid to hear. We didn't expel a problematic member, she announced to the council session. We amputated our own limbs. The chamber erupted in angry shouts, but Zelani Vosk continued. For decades, humans were quietly solving problems we never even knew existed. They prevented conflicts before they started. They maintained trade routes we took for granted. They provided medical research that saved billions of lives. That's enough, shouted Representative Gorthok of the Korthok Empire. Humans were aggressive and unpredictable. Yes, Zelani Vosk agreed, her skin shifting to a determined blue-green. They were unpredictable. That's what made them valuable. While we followed established procedures, they found new solutions. While we debated, they acted. While we maintained the status quo, they pushed us to be better. Chancellor Yalaris tried to restore order, but the damage was done. For the first time since the Exodus, someone had publicly admitted that removing humans might have been a mistake. Sub-Chancellor Creven took advantage of the chaos to release his own report. The true cost of isolation was a comprehensive analysis of every problem that had emerged since the human exodus. The numbers were devastating: economic collapse in major sectors, military defeats on every front, medical crises spreading across multiple systems, environmental disasters that could have been prevented, scientific progress halted in dozens of crucial fields. But the most disturbing part of the report dealt with the mysterious signals from former human space. Deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures from the direction of human territory, Creven announced. These readings suggest technological advancement far beyond anything we've seen before. Impossible, muttered former Chancellor Thexvar from his seat in the gallery. Humans couldn't have advanced that far in 5 years. The evidence suggests otherwise, Creven replied. Whatever they're doing in their isolation, it's changing them. The energy patterns don't match any known technology. Admiral Kethriel stood up. We've sent 3 reconnaissance fleets toward human space. None returned. They encountered some kind of barrier that disabled their ships without damaging them. The crews were rescued, but they reported seeing things that don't make sense. What kind of things? Chancellor Yalaris asked. Ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy fields that responded to thought. Technology that appears to violate several laws of physics. The chamber fell silent. The implications were terrifying. If humans had advanced their technology that far in just 5 years, what had they become? And more importantly, what did they think of the galaxy that had cast them out? As the session ended in confusion and argument, one thing was clear to everyone present. The humans were no longer the species that had left 5 years ago. They had become something else, something far more advanced and potentially far more dangerous. The Council had wanted to remove a threat. Instead, they had created something that made their original fears look like childish worries. In the darkness beyond known space, humanity was growing into something the galaxy had never imagined possible. And every day, the cost of their absence became more apparent. The reckoning was coming, and the Council was finally beginning to understand what they had lost. 8 years had passed since the human exodus, and Chancellor Yelaris knew she was watching the death of galactic civilization. She stood in her private office high above Nexus Prime, looking out at a view that had once filled her with pride. The crystal spires of the Council's greatest city stretched toward the stars, but now half of them stood dark and empty. Entire sections of the city had been abandoned as species after species withdrew from the failing galactic government. "Madam Chancellor," came the voice of her aide, Keth Varan, "General Voxtar is here with the military briefing." Yelaris turned away from the window. "Send him in." General Voxtar entered the room looking like he had aged decades in the past few months. The proud Korthak warrior, who had once commanded the greatest military force in the galaxy, now seemed broken by endless defeats. "The report, General," Yelaris said simply. "The hegemony has taken the Valthari home system," Voxtar announced without emotion. "Thexvar's replacement government has surrendered. That brings their total conquest to 1/3 of former Council space." Yelaris closed her eyes. The Valthari had been founding members of the Council, one of the oldest and most advanced species in the galaxy. If they had fallen, nowhere was safe. "How did this happen?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The same way it always happens now," Voxtar replied bitterly. "They use tactics we can't counter. Admiral Choi 16's strategic doctrines, modified and improved. Every time we think we understand their pattern, they change it. But those are human tactics," Yelaris protested. "How can the hegemony use them better than we can?" Voxtar's expression grew even darker. "Because they're not just using the tactics, they're improving them. Our intelligence suggests they have human defectors helping them." The words hit Yelaris like a physical blow. "Defectors? Think about it," Voxtar said. "When we expelled humanity, where did individual humans who were already living in our space go? Some went back to human territory, but others had nowhere to go. Some of them joined the hegemony rather than face exile. The implications were horrifying. Human strategic thinking, combined with hegemony ruthlessness and resources, was proving unstoppable. The very people the Council had rejected were now helping to destroy them. Across the galaxy, the disasters were multiplying faster than anyone could respond to them. Captain Drevkon, the cargo ship captain who had struggled with pirates 5 years earlier, was now dead. His ship had been destroyed in a hegemony raid that Council forces had failed to prevent. The medical supplies he had been carrying could have saved thousands of lives on the Rim worlds. Those worlds were now under hegemony control. Dr. Yestara, who had tried to save Kethmore from environmental disaster, had also died. The atmospheric processors had finally failed completely, and the planet's remaining population had been evacuated to overcrowded refugee stations. 12 billion beings were dead, and another 2 billion were homeless refugees. The Kethmore disaster had been completely preventable with human terraforming technology. Instead, it had become a symbol of the Council's helplessness in the face of problems their predecessors had solved routinely. But even worse news was coming from the medical research centers. Dr. Morgan sat in his laboratory, staring at tests, results that made no sense. The Thessian wasting disease had mutated again, and this time it was affecting species that should have been completely immune. "How many dead this time?" asked Dr. Felthas. 47 million in the past month," Dr. Morgan replied. "The disease is becoming more aggressive. It's like it's evolving specifically to defeat our treatments." Dr. Felthas looked at the genetic analysis on her screen. "These mutation patterns, they're too organized to be natural. It's almost like something is guiding the disease's evolution." "Don't say that," Dr. Morgan warned. "If the Council thinks this plague is being used as a weapon." But privately, he wondered the same thing. The disease had been almost under control when Dr. Bei Sun Young was working on it. Since the humans left, it had become increasingly deadly and unpredictable. Without human medical expertise, entire star systems were dying. The final straw came, when Chancellor Yelaris received a report that made her question everything she thought she knew about the situation. "Madam Chancellor," said Intelligence Director Morshan, "we've detected massive fleet movements in the core systems. The hegemony is preparing for something big." "How big?" Yelaris asked. "Our analysts believe they're planning to attack Nexus Prime itself." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Nexus Prime was the heart of galactic civilization, the symbol of everything the Council represented. If it fell, organized resistance would collapse across the galaxy. "What are our defensive options?" Yelaris asked. "Limited," General Vox Tar admitted. "We have the remnants of 30 fleet groups, but they're scattered across the galaxy trying to contain other crises. Even if we brought them all back, the hegemony outnumbers us 3-1. And their tactical advantage is insurmountable," Voxtar said quietly. "Madam Chancellor, we need to consider the unthinkable." Yelaris knew what he meant. For months, various council members had been suggesting the same desperate solution, but she had refused to consider it until now. "You want to try to contact the humans," she said. "It's our only hope," Voxtar replied. "Whatever they've become, they're still human. They might help us against the hegemony." But even that desperate plan faced seemingly impossible obstacles. Every attempt to penetrate human space had failed. Captain Drevkon's old friend, Captain Yentaler, had volunteered to lead the latest expedition to the Sol system. His fleet of 12 ships had approached Earth carefully, broadcasting messages of peace and requests for negotiation. What they found had shaken everyone who heard the reports. "The planet is there," Captain Yentaler had reported. "But it's wrong. It seems to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Our sensors can't get accurate readings. When we tried to approach, we encountered defensive platforms that our computers can't even classify." "What kind of platforms?" the Council had asked. "Unknown design, unknown materials, unknown energy, sources." They broadcast a single warning. "This space is closed. Your presence is noted. Depart." We tried to respond, but they didn't acknowledge our communications. Most disturbing was what happened when the fleet tried to get closer. Their right ships had simply stopped working. Not damaged, not destroyed, just stopped. Engines shut down, weapons went offline, life support switched to emergency power. The crews found themselves drifting helplessly until the platforms allowed them to restart their systems and leave. The technology they displayed, Captain Yentaler had concluded, is decades ahead of anything we understand. Maybe centuries ahead. Intelligence Director Morshan had been studying these reports for weeks. "Madam Chancellor, I believe the humans have undergone some kind of technological breakthrough. The energy signatures we're detecting suggest they've mastered technologies we thought were theoretical." "Such as?" Yelaris asked. "Dimensional manipulation, quantum consciousness transfer, reality-based computing, technologies that could make them effectively godlike compared to us." The silence in the room was broken by an urgent communication from the deep space monitoring stations. "Madam Chancellor," came the panicked voice of Station Commander Gexral. "Massive energy spike detected from the direction of former human space. Whatever they're doing out there, it's getting stronger." Yelaris walked back to her window and stared out at the dying city below. The Council had expelled humanity because they were afraid of human aggression and unpredictability. Now, 8 years later, they faced the possible extinction of galactic civilization. The humans they had cast out had become something unimaginably advanced. The galaxy they had tried to control was falling apart without human innovation and protection. And the greatest enemy they faced, the hegemony, was using human knowledge against them. "Prepare another expedition to human space," she ordered, quietly. "This time, we're not going to ask for their help, we're going to beg for it." But even as she gave the order, Yelaris wondered if humanity would even remember the species that had rejected them, or if they would care about the fate of a galaxy that had chosen isolation over cooperation. The desperate gamble was about to begin. and the stakes were the survival of everything the Council had ever built. In the darkness beyond known space, signals pulsed between human worlds that had grown beyond all recognition. Something vast and powerful was stirring, and soon, the galaxy would learn what humanity had become in their exile. The reckoning was almost here.